how India should address disaster. But before we talk about all of these things, the one thing I want to ask you is, with which I want to start this conversation, is that the last couple of months we've spoken, and the entire media, and I say that media as well, strategic thinking has been very focused on what's happening in the US, what's happening in the two wars that the world is facing. What about what's happening in our backyard, sir? Whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Bangladesh, you're probably the best person to talk to us about that. Your thoughts on what's happening in Pakistan right now?
Oh, let me start, Gaurie. First of all, thank you for having me on this program. But let me start with the fact that last 2 years, all of us have been following Ukraine.
Yeah.
And for the last 16 months or so, we've been following Gaza.
Yeah.
And now, all of a sudden, you find a change in the United States leadership. And Trumpism having come, Trump 2.0 having come there, with the disruptive leadership of the finest kind, which you can look at, as you can see. In the last 1 month, we have seen some major decisions taking place and a tremendous reshaping of the world order, which is taking place right in front of our eyes. I think we in India, the Indian media, the Indian strategic community at the moment are all focused on what the United States is thinking and doing under the leadership of its new president. Not really a new president, an old new president. And the president's focus obviously is on Europe, Ukraine, on Middle East, on Canada, Mexico, and places like that. And this seems to be drawing a lot of eyeballs in India, as a result of which I find there are lots of activities happening in our neighborhood.
Yes.
Which somehow the strategic community is not so much focused upon. I wrote about this just a day or two ago, just to draw attention of the people to the fact that on both flanks, earlier it was simply on the Pakistani front, but now you have an eastern front in terms of Bangladesh, on both fronts. We are finding very interesting developments. Let me start with Pakistan. Pakistan, the economy was in doldrums. We expected that the state in which it is, Pakistan, would not risk any ventures against India. Even if it did, it would keep it absolutely below the threshold. To my mind, I think over the last 1 year, Pakistan has continued its activities in Kashmir, for example, despite the fact that it has a deteriorating relationship with Afghanistan. It's got a deteriorating situation, internal security situation within Pakistan, and its economy has been still in doldrums. Despite that, it had to do something in Kashmir to keep the ball rolling. Otherwise, investment of 35 years since 1989 would have gone completely waste. And it's because of that that I would like to draw the attention of our viewers to the 9th of June, when the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi was being sworn in for the 3rd time. That was the day when we had a major terror attack on a bus. One should not forget these events. A bus in the Riyasi area, the Riyasi district of Udhampur. And from then onwards, 2 months later, you found a cascade of events. Jammu burning, fair amount of terror activities taking place.
In fact, in 2024, sir, there's been a huge spike in the terror attacks also that have taken place in Jammu Kashmir, haven't they?
Absolutely, and this all happened in early part of 2024, and then the middle of 2024. This continued for a period of about 6 weeks or so, primarily in the Jammu division, Jammu area. A lot of people ascribed it to the fact that we had a redeployment, we had some voids in military deployment in those areas, and Pakistan and the terrorists were taking advantage of that. But I have some other theories of this. While all this was happening, to my mind, there were developments taking place in Bangladesh. And everything came to a head suddenly on the 5th of August. That is just 2 months after the 9th of June. And we found a meltdown with the overthrow of the Prime Minister, with the Awami League government having fallen, the streets turning turbulent, the Hindu minority there being targeted, as if this entire thing was provoked it was brought about as in a manner by which our strategic attention was had turned towards Kashmir, towards Pakistan. And all this was happening on the east, in Bangladesh. Did it happen by design in this manner? I'm only asking myself this question. I don't ask anyone else this question.
No, so you're linking Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
How are you linking that,
Absolutely. Sir? You see, subsequently, the speed at which the activities have taken place in Bangladesh, the military to military cooperation which has suddenly taken off, these things don't happen overnight.
So there was a student revolution, there was an interim government,
Absolutely.
There was an expectation of an election. 6 months down the line, there is no roadmap for an election.
Absolutely.
What has happened is the Pakistan-Bangladesh military drills that are taking place. First time there is a team from Pakistan that is coming in Bangladesh, they are there. How do you see this? Do you think there is more to this, and what is really happening?
This question has often been asked to me, and I have always started by responding and saying that to my mind, Pakistan never left Dhaka ever, even after 1971. They left behind enough agents, they left behind enough people who were in empathy and sympathy with them, who virtually acted as sleeper agents for the better part of the last 50 years, you can say. And Pakistan has maintained its contacts extremely well in this area. There have been governments in Bangladesh which have not been very favorable to India earlier. We were fortunate that we had the Sheikh Hasina government all these years, and things had turned much more positive for us. But in those years when those governments which were not so much
Khalida Zia, in fact, yeah.
That's right. Those were the times when Pakistan continued building its contacts, continued its activities, and you found its linkages with the radicals, particularly in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, very, very pronounced. So all this seems to have come to a quick kind of a linkage after the 5th of August, and you find military activities, military to military cooperation suddenly taking off.
Do you think ISI has active contacts with the radical elements in Bangladesh?
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. The ISI has always had contacts, and it's renewed and enhanced its contacts now. And you found a delegation of the ISI. It's not the DG ISI, but a delegation which had visited recently. And I won't call it a routine visit. It was a visit to send home some very clear messages to India that Pakistan and the Bangladesh were in sync with each other, and that we were so far looking at the Western Front, and we need to start looking at the Eastern Front.
So talk to us, sir, explain to us that when you talk about these military cooperation, when you talk about these military drills, this visit that happened of the Pakistani military delegation, the ISI, what really happens in those delegation meetings, and what happens? And what should be our key takeaway from that?
One is a simple fact that you have a military delegation, an ordinary military delegation going for discussing training matters or discussing procurement and supplies and support and things of that kind. And the other is a sharing of intelligence and operational synchronization, linkages, etc. I'm not even suggesting that there is anything operational which is being discussed between Bangladesh and Pakistan, but definitely intelligence cooperation has definitely enhanced to a great extent. And I think there is an attempt being made to psychologically sort of surround us, to show as if we've got many fronts and we need to look all around us. There is a northern front with China, and there is the Indian Ocean, and there is an eastern front, and there is a western front. Most adversaries would always like their enemies, their adversaries, to keep looking around instead of being focused entirely in their direction. Now, a visit of the ISI delegation and to important places like Rangpur, which an ordinary citizen will not put his mind to. Rangpur is very close to the Siliguri corridor, and that is a vulnerability of India. A military mind like ours, like mine, or in many others, would obviously wake up to it and wonder why was this visit done there. Why to Chittagong? Chittagong is an important harbour, no doubt. It's a port. It's very close to Myanmar. It's close to Tripura. It's close to Indian territory, in the eastern edge of Bangladesh. It's been an important city, no doubt, but there's all kinds of strategic messaging which emanates from a visit of this kind there, and then meeting the tribal chiefs and that kind of a thing.
So India has a porous border with Bangladesh. It's been one of our big border issues for decades now. We've tried to address some of it, and I'm going to come to what the mess and the present situation between the border forces on both sides are. I'm going to come to that in a bit. But before that, I want to ask you, in the backdrop of a porous border, how does intelligence sharing between Pakistan and Bangladesh impact us more?
You see, this is not an era of direct war. We've seen two all near conventional wars. We've seen the war in Ukraine, 2 years, mass destruction with no results.
Yeah.
Right. We've seen what's happened in Gaza.
Yeah.
To say that Israel has won the war, I think would be an incorrect military deduction. With 350,000 men, you climb onto a territory of 25 kilometers by 35 kilometers and yet raze it to the ground and yet do not put an end to the kind of terror which Hamas is still capable of. Is not victory either. So, it's very clear that conventional wars have not delivered. What the world has increasingly been doing and probably revisiting now is the concept of hybrid wars. I think two examples I can give you of classic proxy wars. One is Jammu Kashmir,
Yes.
which Pakistan has been playing for the better part of 36 years now against us. It's sponsored proxy conflict, which can continue forever. The investment is very little in that. The second very, very pronounced example, which has been in the news, is obviously Iran and Iran's concept, Iran's raising of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, was for this very purpose, to fight, to control the area of the Levant, to fight Israel on the basis of proxies. Hamas was a proxy. You find Hezbollah was a proxy. The Syrian army virtually acted as a proxy. You find the Houthis today. You found proxies in Iraq. Everywhere where Iran was attempting to gain its influence or still can influence, it was always by proxy.
Yeah.
That brings us to this thought process. Why would Pakistan, sitting on one other edge of India, on the western edge, what could it possibly do with Pakistan, with Bangladesh here? It has engaged us with proxies in Kashmir all these years. Can it do the same thing in
Bangladesh
on the eastern front? We've got northeastern states, terrain completely in the favor. In the sense, it's a difficult terrain, mountainous, jungle terrain. There is population there. It's underdeveloped, that region. There are routes leading from there into Myanmar and places like that. All this complicates. The moment as you have a very complicated terrain, it favors the proxy. And that is what I fear more. No one is going to fight you directly. Pakistan doesn't have the capability to fight you directly. But we should keep our eyes open, ears open to the possibility of these kind of hybrid activities. What I am identifying need not necessarily be the only activity.
But do you think that there could be a proxy war sponsored by Pakistan from Bangladesh for India?
It can be low, very, very low intensity, going up to very high intensity at times. You've seen what's happened in Kashmir?
Yeah.
It's been, you can compare it to what happened in Pulwama or what happens to the killing of a single territorial army soldier. It meanders between high intensity and low intensity. That's a characteristic of hybrid war, which always happens.
And there is now extreme radicalization that is taking place in Bangladesh.
Exactly, it is taking place at the moment. Although I would say the stance that India has taken on Bangladesh has been very, very correct. We have not been provocative at all, to the extent that our cooperation with Bangladesh continues in almost every way. I think people from Bangladesh still look at India as the best option in terms of medical tourism. The supply lines are still open.
Education, medical tourism,
Absolutely.
all of it.
All these things, they are still open. Right. It is only the radical element which has taken over the streets at the moment. Hopefully, this will turn around. It will not last forever.
But as someone who's understood Pakistan so well, as someone who knows Pakistan for the last 30, 40 years, that's how a lot of Pakistan started. Where General Zia-ul-Haq came, there was radicalization. It started from the military, spread to the society, and then we've seen what happened in the last 40, 50 years. Do you see Bangladesh inching towards that possibility, given what is happening?
Early to say yet. But yes, a very rapid change overnight on the 5th of August. The build-up to it was there for approximately 3 weeks. That did take us by surprise, right? We had invested a lot, perhaps, in the Awami League, and maybe the mistake that India had made over the years, not with this government alone, but over the years that we had made, was that we had a single party focus, a single personality focus, etc. When this problem took place, a lot of friends of mine from Bangladesh spoke to me and said that I think you all have not understood the sentiments in Bangladesh. We wish to be democratic. We wish to have our elected leaders, and they felt that the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina was not democratic enough.
Okay.
The question we should ask them today is, is democracy being delivered to you today to you?
Is the alternative better?
Is it better or not, right? So I do think the people in Bangladesh have a mind of their own. They are very emotional, very sentimental politically. And if democracy is not delivered by this government, I don't think this government can last either.
There'll be another uprising.
There can be another uprising. And in the middle of all this, the Bangladesh army, to my mind, is still in the grey zone. It is, I have served with the Bangladesh army in the United Nations. I have visited and spoken at their institutions. I have deep respect for them, very deep respect for them, for their leadership. I don't think they are radicalized in any way. A lot of people may think so, but I think there's a very sane element within which understands the larger nuances of a relationship with India. And if you see off late, lots of statements coming out from leaders of the Bangladesh army, which are very salutary kind of statements on this relationship with India.
Trying to placate possibly before it gets worse. But General Hasnain, a lot has been said in the last, decade or so about Pakistan, China becoming the two-front possibly for India, a two-front war coming in. Given how we are dealing with a very complex, volatile Bangladesh situation, how do you then assess the entire area for us? Are we then looking at a three-front war possibility for India? And what could be the ramifications? What should we be dealing with there?
I don't think we should automatically assume that with the change of the situation in Bangladesh, Bangladesh has become an adversary or an enemy. I don't think so. They have a lot of good thinkers. They have some very good analysts who will probably advise the government there that on one hand, provocation of this kind can perhaps deliver you brownie points politically or whatever on the streets, etc. But otherwise, it is only friendship with India which can sustain Bangladesh. Right?
You mentioned Pak proxies in Bangladesh.
That's
so that's
right.
why I'm asking.
That has to be resisted by them. And I do think that there are elements in Bangladesh who will resist this. I still believe that all is not lost. But to come back to your main question, we should be realistic enough to realize that yes, a third front could be possible. And we need not ignore it completely. That's one of the things which I did speak of in a couple of seminars conducted at the India Habitat Center, where I said Bangladesh, after all, is a 10-division army. And 10 divisions are it's a fairly large quantum, right? And but that does not necessarily mean that we are enemies. No, we have been friends all these years. I have been giving this example where I think this is the best projection to Bangladesh that India has, the Indian Army has got a concept when it does its training. We have an exercise enemy, a training enemy. The enemy on the Western Front is called Nark, the forces of hell.
Okay, yeah, Nark.
And we've got a imaginary enemy in the north. It's called Chandal, the forces of the devil.
Right.
Right? So the Indian army battles these two forces which are imaginatively kind of deployed. Do we have a name for Bangladesh? No, we don't.
Do we need to come up with one?
Because we know we never considered Bangladesh an adversary.
But do we need to come up with one now?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think better sense will prevail. Our leadership is very mature, and the way it has handled Bangladesh so far, the message will go very clearly to the people of Bangladesh, and I'm sure Bangladesh itself will realize and decide that the best bet still lies in favor of India.
You know, one thing I want to ask about Bangladesh, and then I'm going to ask you some of the other neighboring countries, which is that in the last couple of weeks, or rather about 2 months or so, there's been a lot of tension on the border between the border forces, whether our BSF or their BGB, and it's about fencing, you know, or installation of CCTV cameras. Why is that a concern? Why is that becoming such a
There's been a history of this even before 1971.
Okay.
Right? And thereafter, you would remember, I think it was the year 2001 or sometime around the early part of the millennium, where we had a standoff between the Border Security Force and the border forces of Bangladesh, where a couple of BSF troops were killed on our side. And there was a very, very insensitive way by which the bodies were delivered to us, you know, hung upside down, almost like the carcass of an animal. And that went down very, very badly with the BSF establishment, with the armed forces, with the people of India. Those of us who were part of the strategic community even then, in the sense we were looking at situations, cannot forget that at all. So since then there has been tension on the borders, and you know, the Bangladesh-India border is a very awkward border. There is a tremendous amount of cattle smuggling, there's some other amount of drug smuggling and things of that nature. So it's a gray zone which exists all the time. You can never dictate black and white here, this is correct and this is wrong. As a result, there's a lot of give and take, there's a lot of understanding between the local commanders. You come across one irksome kind of a provocative commander and things can go completely wrong, right? So that is an unfortunate thing, and our BSF has been very mature. They've been working on this for long. Bangladesh has unfortunately had a history in its border forces of a tremendous amount of turbulence. You would remember there was almost a coup d'etat within the Bangladesh border forces sometime about 15, 20 years ago, 2008, 2009 I think it happened, when you had a revolt in which the troops took over the leadership. They killed many of the Bangladesh army officers of the rank of three-star generals, etc. And that was the beginning, actually, or many times people say that was the beginning of the greatest radicalization in Bangladesh. It was all provoked by various Jamaati elements, etc. We won't go into that, but
those Jamaati elements are now
the fact remains that this is a very it's a force with which our border forces have had a problem in the past, and that somehow, that legacy of that continues, although lots of efforts are going on today. Our DG BSF has they've had a meeting with their counterparts, and this whole issue, the fencing issue, which was going on, which was creating a lot of provocations on that. These are things which are being discussed. One thing is very clear what India is doing. We are not getting provoked, and we are, I think, showing a very mature attitude to every action which is taking place.
Okay.
To the extent of even accepting certain issues in which we feel that the other side may be on the wrong, but we have not sort of taken corrective action on it, simply to allow the situation to not to fester in that manner, allow it to just stabilize.
And I think that's a very matured way of handling a situation. We also had our Secretary Vikram Misri go there for a day to just try and placate a situation that is so volatile right now. Let me then, shift focus and ask you about, apart from what is happening in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, Kashmir, an area that you understand so well, whether it is Siachen, whether it is that entire terrain. How do you see the political situation in Kashmir now? There have been elections that have taken place. How do you see that area now from a political point of view, from a social point of view, given that you understand that area so well?
I wrote something just 2-3 days ago, and I dismissed your question in 2 or 3 sentences. And there's a reason for that. I said I'm very happy to see that there is no political turbulence inside Kashmir. One would have expected that with the National Conference having won the election, having come to power, there would be on the war path, a restoration of Article 370, and things of that. They've been very quiet, they've been very mature. And only a day ago, Mr. Umar Abdullah has had an interview on BBC, a very provocative interview, I would say, and his responses again have been extremely soft, stable, not the ones we would have expected in some things in the past. I think that's the best approach at the moment.
Why do you think he changed?
Well,
we all know NC's stance.
We all know that there's not much that the NC can do. First of all, the stance on Article 370. I do feel not everyone in Kashmir agrees with the removal of Article 370, but a very large number of people now are of the opinion that Article 370 really served no purpose. And it's more of a psychological fight for their autonomy or whatever you want to call it, nothing more than that, right? I think that aspect has dawned on Umar Abdullah also. And he realizes that the first objective that the National Conference is looking at is essentially the grant of statehood, because that hits perhaps the self-esteem of the Kashmiri, of the political community in Kashmir. They feel that they can't be seen to be just a union territory. They are very important. They are a very important segment of India, and they need to be seen as a full state. I think the Union of India also realizes and will in due course do it, but it will take its time. Now, one of the things that you have to remember is that by being a union territory, the security
is in the domain of the central government. Yeah.
Now, that's a very important issue, because not that Mr. Umar Abdullah did not handle security well. I was the corps commander when he was the chief minister at that time, and I remember having frequent interactions with him, and he was he listened very, very patiently always. Right? He came to my headquarters also, and I gave him a full briefing there. Very, very mature in his approach. There were times when we had differences of opinion, like the removal of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which I did not agree with at all. So these are normal issues of governance which take place. But obviously there is a changed stance today, and the government of India has to be clear that the security situation in Jammu and Kashmir must not ever revert to what it was in the past.
I was coming to just that, that in the backdrop of the fact that 2024 saw increased terror activities, in the backdrop of a volatile political situation in Pakistan, which Imran Khan is forever trying to take on the establishment head on, should the security situation in Kashmir be the way it is right now, because the center needs to keep its guard up given all that is happening in Pakistan?
You see, Gaurie, one thing we must remember, even if the statehood is given, and I'm sure the government will veer towards that opinion only, where even if the statehood is given and you restore the self-esteem of the people, etc., the government of India from the center can always maintain a strong vigil on security. After all, you have the Indian Army there.
Yeah,
the
army is deployed by the central government. Yes,
whole of Northern Command is there. The whole of the Rashtra Rifles is there.
I only meant from, is this a good time to even discuss it, given what is happening in Pakistan? That's what I was asking.
I always feel that a vulnerability will always remain in Kashmir. It is not as if we are back to 1989. No. 1989 was very different. Our understanding and realization of hybrid war was very different. Today, I can say with confidence, you can't have that kind of recruitment which you had at that time of terrorist cadres. You cannot have infiltration of that kind. You cannot set up that kind of terror financing. Our intelligence networks are extremely strong. You can't set up an ecosystem for terror, which is so essential for Pakistan if they want to fight a reasonable proxy war. So what Pakistan can essentially do is create temporary situations of turbulence, like they did in Jammu in the recent past, where you induct a group of terrorists inside, use money power in certain areas, a bit of ideology in certain areas, choose certain areas only and decide to create this kind of turbulence. That is very much possible. Even under central government rule or under state government rule, this much probably can happen.
Okay.
Despite the fact that you have a strong presence of the Indian Army, and I'm one of those who advocates that never jump to conclusions of normalcy, because in hybrid war, defining normalcy is very, very difficult. If you get millions of
Hybrid
tourists,
warfare is the new normal.
That's the new norm, absolutely. If you are getting millions of tourists coming into Kashmir in summer, in winter, for religious tourism in Jammu, coming to Vaishno Devi and places like that, it doesn't mean at the end of the day that normalcy has come. If hotel spaces are hugely expensive, if 93 flights a day are landing in Srinagar, it doesn't necessarily mean that
So
from
what
a
will
security angle you are completely stable.
So what will ensure and what will be our parameter to judge normalcy then?
But that's this is a grey zone. This is what grey zone is all about, right? Where you should not jump to any conclusions on it. Try and define your parameters and say that a period of low-level violence. For example, we had a period of low-level violence through 2021, 22 perhaps, right? 23, 24, it all came back again in a fairly marked way. So, extremely low periods of violence, the parameters of infiltration down, terror financing down, you're not getting any provocative acts, you're finding the situation inside Pakistan also reasonably stable. All these when you put together, then perhaps you can judge and say a situation of normalcy has come. Now, I would say if the situation in Pakistan continues to be what it is at the moment, that itself will dictate what the situation of normalcy in Jammu and Kashmir is.
How do you think Pakistan is going to be going forward from a political point of view, given that it's been over a year since Imran Khan's taking on the government has continued, and it's not going down.
It's not going down. There's no doubt about it. The government of Pakistan, the Pakistan Army, which is becoming more and more powerful every day. General Munir, 2 years down, is obviously assuming more and more power, becoming more important. He will be seeking his subsequent extension also, I'm sure, which will go into 5 years and perhaps more.
Courts have completely now collapsed after that new commission that has come in.
Absolutely. So when you look at all this, you realize that Imran Khan and his party may not be able to make so much of a difference at the moment. And it's going to be the army which will rule the roost, with this proxy government of the army continuing as it is. And from time to time, the army will have to show its relevance. It will want to make sure that it gets back into Jammu and Kashmir, at least in a manner symbolically, to show the people of Pakistan that, see, with our control here, we've still got Kashmir as an issue which is burning. This reminder will keep going back to the people. Not only to the people, but perhaps to the Islamic world as such. Otherwise, the Islamic world will stop speaking of Kashmir. And for Pakistan, it's important to keep the Kashmir issue alive in the Islamic world and in the UN. Although this year they have not raised this issue in the UN at all. But I'm sure in due course they will raise it again. It's not something that is going to be forgotten immediately. The economy of Pakistan was one of the limiting factors in this. Is it bouncing back? I don't think so in a hurry, but things seem to be improving. I find FDI has increased. remittances have come in, the IMF is coming into, a team of IMF is coming in for inspections and
So this will embolden and empower the army more
absolutely.
in Pakistan.
That is the thing. And I seem to find that despite the low level of finances available to the government of Pakistan, somehow they managed to look at purchases, weapon purchases, modernization of the armed forces, etc., and that seemed to continue. So obviously there is a lot of hidden money which is there in the system, which is obviously not being sort of revealed to the world.
Shifting gears, sir, as someone who's served whether in UN peacekeeping forces in Mozambique and whether it is in Punjab, Kashmir, so many places, I want to ask from you, sir, in terms of your military career, and I'm sure a lot of viewers would be wanting to know, which has been your toughest phases, ones that probably brought out the best in you, also taught you. But talk to us about, we've spoken about Kashmir, but what about Punjab? What about those UN peacekeeping forces in Mozambique?
I think the most difficult part of my entire military career has been the time I spent in Sri Lanka.
Operation Pavan it was.
Operation Pavan.
Yeah.
My unit was deployed in one of the most difficult areas, in the area of Vavunia, a place called Mulaituvu. Where my battalion headquarters was, I think 5 kilometers or 8 kilometers away from there, Prabhakaran was finally killed by the Sri Lankan army in 2009. That was the lair, that was the fortress of the LTTE where my battalion was deployed, and everywhere we had solid contacts with them. I learnt my profession actually all over again. Ground level, sub-tactical level issues today, if I can reflect upon, is because of the contacts, the firing which I had on my head, which was going on all the time in that period in Sri Lanka. And while grading these, I would say the other very challenging situation was as GOC 15 Corps.
Yeah, of course.
GOC 15 Corps is an appointment which is operational and strategic at the same time. You are advising the Chief Minister, you are also looking at tactical issues, you are looking at the line of control, you are looking at the political environment, you are looking at the media,
everything,
and the social environment, which is so important in hybrid conditions. And in my time, I took it upon myself to make sure that soft power was delivered to the people. Soft power of the army was delivered to the people. We were capable of reaching out to the people and telling them that you are not our enemies.
We are in this together.
We are in this together.
What was your learning from Sri Lanka? The biggest learning that you still carry?
Biggest learning from Sri Lanka was military learning. It was regimentation. The power of regimentation. I was just a company commander. I handled 120 men. But the kind of loyalty which I saw and the unit, the kind of bonding that we developed, without that bonding, units cannot function. I learned all over again the whole concept of soldiering and regimentation in Sri Lanka.
And how do you see that country right now? You know that terrain, you know that place so well. How do you see the present president, the present dispensation?
I went to Sri Lanka a couple of times, and I have not been able to visit those areas where I fought, but I have been in Colombo and some other areas. I have spoken to a lot of people there. I have looked at the Sri Lankan media from time to time, and I did write a lot on this after those visits, where I felt that the conflict has not terminated in Sri Lanka. The LTTE, the Tamil antipathy against the majority continues. And I did write at one end as a conclusion to an article that sometime in the next 20-25 years, a Prabhakaran will again be born.
That's a very profound statement you're making. More so, given the present president, who's just won on a very significant mandate, has spoken very strongly against the Tamil cause and the Tamil majority northern provinces in the past.
You see, the ability to you have to remember that when you have got a minority population with you, either you do ethnic cleansing and throw them into the Indian Ocean, or you take them along. To take them along is not a very easy thing. You have to compromise with the majority also to some extent. Now, what the Sinhala majority has not done is They have not wanted to compromise on anything with the Tamil minority. The kind of provocative statements in the media, etc., led me to believe that no, this situation is not over. Militarily, you can destroy the LTTE and their bases, etc. I mean, the LTTE has been my enemy also, but I am today talking in their favor and saying that, you see, tomorrow, no one can claim that the LTTE has been completely defeated. An organization in an island state which could survive in jungles with the popular support of the people and bring in so much military wherewithal, from where? How did they create the networks? This is something which needs to be studied in very, very great detail.
Indeed. Sir, there are a couple of rapid fire questions that my team came up with, and I must put them to you as well, because they said that really tells the person behind these thoughts. The first thing that I want to ask you is, your father was also a decorated officer, and how did his military career influence your thinking and your choices?
Well, the fact remains that I came to the army because of my father. I visited all the places where he used to go to, and I used to get hugely motivated by that. Motivation was the maximum, was from my regimental affinity. My father was also from the same regiment, and I spoke about regimentation to you just now, and very well before I even was commissioned, I had decided I will join the Garhwal Rifles. I will join 4 Garhwal Rifles, no other unit. I remained in that, I joined that unit, I remained in the unit, commanded that unit, right? And grew up to be the colonel of the Garhwal Rifles subsequently, and today, still today, Garhwal and Garhwali troops is something that I love the most.
Yeah. A lot of life and death decisions you must have encountered. The one that really is etched in your memory for life?
One was the first day of my command on the Siachen Glacier. The unfortunate situation where you lose an officer on the first day. I lost an officer sitting at a choke post on Siachen Glacier, killed by a sniper, Pakistani sniper. I had just taken over the unit.
That was day one of your...
Day one of my command. I had just come back from the United Nations. I had climbed up to the glacier. The unit was there already. And the day I landed at the battalion headquarters, within 2 hours this happened. What a great challenge this is for you suddenly. You know, people will think, oh, just one officer losing his life is a challenge. Oh my God, the whole situation, I mean, everything changes around you, right? The other situations I could still also relate to are many times in Kashmir, where you are left thinking and you are alone, especially when you are at senior ranks. There was a situation where a young boy had probably gone to meet his girlfriend, and he was killed by an ambush of one of my paratroopers. Why was he killed? Because he was challenged and he ran. He was unarmed. He ran, and they fired. And it always, I think it's Murphy's Law, that when you don't want something to happen, it happens. Yeah. And they just fired, and that bullet hit him and he died. It was discovered he was just an innocent man who was probably going to meet his girl. In Kashmir, this is a major challenge. Where do you go? Where do young people go and hold hands?
Yeah.
It's such an important aspect of life. They don't even know, with no places where they can go and hold hands.
Yes.
So now the question was, a lot of people suggested to me that, sir, he can be declared a terrorist. And that is something which hits you. I had decided and made up my mind well before. I will not tell a lie when I'm in command, because lies only multiply into more lies.
And also the memory of that person is ruined forever.
Absolutely. So yeah. I straight away said, no, there's no question of declaring him a terrorist. We have made a mistake, we will admit that mistake. I rang up. You'll be happy to know that I rang up NDTV that night.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I rang up NDTV that night, and I asked NDTV, would they be kind enough to put a ticker on their news channel? And they did put a ticker, in which I said, GOC 15 Corps regrets the incident. But we followed the rules of engagement, which meant that we challenged, he made a mistake, we fired, our killing him was ultimately a mistake, right? But we followed the rules of engagement. Subsequently, what we did was, I went to the family, I apologized to the family.
And you owned up the mistake.
I owned up the mistake. We compensated, we gave a job to we sent the younger brother to the Army Public School in Pahalgam, and we gave a job to the elder brother. Everything that I could within my powers, I did. But it was a mistake, and I was damned that I would ever say that it was not a mistake.
A book that shaped your military thinking the most?
You'll be surprised. The first thought which comes to my mind is because of my association with Kashmir is Eric Sen's book, Slender Was the Thread. Now, not many people in India have read it. This is a book of the 1947-48 operations.
Okay.
It's a classic book, the landing of the Indian Army at Srinagar on the 27th of October, the subsequent battles which were fought. And I happened to be fortunate to have commanded the Uri Brigade. I commanded the Baramulla Division. So all these battles were fought in that area through the Jhelum Valley. They can recall them all. In fact, many times when people visited Kashmir, I used to tell them, I am the best guide. I will sit in the front of the vehicle and you sit at the back, and I will guide you through 45 kilometers from Baramulla or from Srinagar till Uri, 100 kilometers of the battlefields. Shelatang, Baramulla itself, Mohra, Uri, places like that. It's all intention of mine, and that's perhaps because of the love of Kashmir.
Of course. Final question. Leading men in war or leading them in peace? What takes more strength and courage?
I opted to always remain in operational situations in command. And I was always, as a company commander in Sri Lanka, as a battalion commander in Siachen, and subsequently in the Pangong Tso, as a brigade commander in Uri, as a division commander in Baramulla, and the corps commander in Kashmir. I did not see peace. But there were situations where I was in peace too. I think those who command in peace, those who serve in peace, have far more difficult times. It's the operational environment and the war conditions where a soldier really rebels.
Thank you so much, sir. This was enlightening, and I'm sure people watching this would have a completely different idea of what it's like to really lead divisions and also understand the larger socio-political environment in which soldiers exist and companies exist. Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you very much, and Jai Hind to all our viewers.
Jai Hind, sir. Thank you. No, so you're linking Pakistan and Bangladesh. How are you linking that?
To my mind, Pakistan never left Dhaka.
Do you think ISI has active contacts with the radical elements in Bangladesh?
There's no doubt about it. The LTTE, the Tamil, sometime in the next 20-25 years, a Prabhakaran will again be born. I decided I will join the Garhwal Rifles. I will join 4 Garhwal Rifles, no other unit. Young boy had probably gone to meet his girlfriend, and he was killed by an ambush of one of my paratroopers. A lot of people suggested to me that, sir, he can be declared a terrorist. We have made a mistake, we will admit that mistake. I rang up, you'll be happy to know that I rang up NDTV that night.
Oh, you did? Okay. Welcome to another edition of SptOn with Gaurie Dwivedi, and today I have with me a very special guest, one of India's most distinguished military minds, everything from strategic policy making to what should be the key takeaways as far as military strategic viewpoints for India going forward is what I wish to cover with Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain. So thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you, Jai Hind, and a great pleasure being on your program.
Sir, I must at least try to do justice to your very illustrious bio by telling our viewers that you've commanded troops in Kashmir. You were former GOC of the legendary 15 Corps, and you were the military secretary of the Indian Army, chancellor of the Central University of Kashmir, and of course we are sitting here today at the National Disaster Management Authority, which also is making very important contributions to how India should address disaster. But before we talk about all of these things, the one thing I want to ask you is, with which I want to start this conversation, is that the last couple of months we've spoken, and the entire media, and I say that media as well, strategic thinking has been very focused on what's happening in the US, what's happening in the 2 wars that the world is facing. What about what's happening in our backyard, sir? Whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Bangladesh, you're probably the best person to talk to us about that. Your thoughts on what's happening in Pakistan right now?
Oh, well, let me start, Gaurie. First of all, thank you for having me on this program. But let me start with the fact that last 2 years, all of us have been following Ukraine.
Yeah.
And for the last 16 months or so, we've been following Gaza.
Yeah.
And now, all of a sudden, you find a change in the United States leadership. and Trumpism having come, Trump 2.0 having come there, with the disruptive leadership of the finest kind, which you can look at, as you can see. In the last 1 month, we have seen some major decisions taking place and a tremendous reshaping of the world order, which is taking place right in front of our eyes. I think we in India, the Indian media, the Indian strategic community at the moment are all focused on what the United States is thinking and doing under the leadership of its new president. Not really a new president, an old new president. And the president's focus obviously is on Europe, Ukraine, on Middle East, on Canada, Mexico, and places like that. And this seems to be drawing a lot of eyeballs in India, as a result of which I find there are lots of activities happening in our neighborhood.
Yes.
Which somehow the strategic community is not so much focused upon. I wrote about this just a day or two ago, just to draw attention of the people to the fact that on both flanks, earlier it was simply on the Pakistani front, but now you have an eastern front in terms of Bangladesh, on both fronts. We are finding very interesting developments. Let me start with Pakistan. Pakistan, the economy was in doldrums. We expected that the state in which it is, Pakistan, would not risk any ventures against India. Even if it did, it would keep it absolutely below the threshold. To my mind, I think over the last 1 year, Pakistan has continued its activities in Kashmir, for example, despite the fact that it has a deteriorating relationship with Afghanistan. It's got a deteriorating situation, internal security situation within Pakistan, and its economy has been still in doldrums. Despite that, it had to do something in Kashmir to keep the ball rolling. Otherwise, investment of 35 years since 1989 would have gone completely waste. And it's because of that that I would like to draw the attention of our viewers to the 9th of June, when the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi was being sworn in for the 3rd time. That was the day when we had a major terror attack on a bus. One should not forget these events. A bus in the Riyasi area, the Riyasi district of Udhampur. And from then onwards, 2 months later, you found a cascade of events. Jammu burning, fair amount of terror activities taking place.
In fact, in 2024, sir, there's been a huge spike in the terror attacks also that have taken place in Jammu Kashmir, haven't they?
Absolutely, and this all happened in early part of 2024, and then the middle of 2024, this continued for a period of about 6 weeks or so, primarily in the Jammu division, Jammu area. A lot of people ascribed it to the fact that we had a redeployment, we had some voids in military deployment in those areas, and Pakistan and the terrorists were taking advantage of that. But I have some other theories of this. While all this was happening, to my mind, there were developments taking place in Bangladesh. And everything came to a head suddenly on the 5th of August. That is just 2 months after the 9th of June. And we found a meltdown with the overthrow of the Prime Minister, with the Awami League government having fallen, the streets turning turbulent, the Hindu minority there being targeted, as if this entire thing was provoked. It was brought about as in a manner by which our strategic attention had turned towards Kashmir, towards Pakistan. And all this was happening on the east, in Bangladesh. Did it happen by design in this manner? I'm only asking myself this question. I don't ask anyone else this question.
No, so you're linking Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
How are you linking that,
Absolutely.
sir?
You see, subsequently, the speed at which the activities have taken place in Bangladesh, the military-to-military cooperation which has suddenly taken off, these things don't happen overnight.
So there was a student revolution, there was an interim government,
Absolutely.
there was an expectation of an election. 6 months down the line, there is no roadmap for election.
Absolutely.
What has happened is the Pakistan-Bangladesh military drills that are taking place. First time there is a team from Pakistan that is coming in Bangladesh, they are there. How do you see this? Do you think there is more to this, and what is really happening?
This question has often been asked to me, and I have always started by responding and saying that to my mind, Pakistan never left Dhaka ever, even after 1971. They left behind enough agents, they left behind enough people who were in empathy and sympathy with them, who virtually acted as sleeper agents for the better part of the last 50 years, you can say. And Pakistan has maintained its contacts extremely well in this area. There have been governments in Bangladesh which have not been very favorable to India earlier. We were fortunate that we had the Sheikh Hasina government all these years, and things had turned much more positive for us. But in those years when those governments which were not so much
Khaleda
friendly with
Zia, in
India,
fact, yeah.
that's right. Those were the times when Pakistan continued building its contacts, continued its activities, and you found its linkages with the radicals, particularly in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, very, very pronounced. So all this seems to have come to a quick kind of a linkage after the 5th of August, and you find military